Hey everyone, welcome back. I am De-Bose. This is De-Bose, the podcast, and this episode is featuring what I like to call a forgotten essential. People who work in public transit. I have a motor coach operator, Eric Bailey. He's a colleague of mine. And we talked about how people who work in public transit, bus drivers, train operators, that they're just kind of forgotten with all of these big thanks that people are giving to the frontline workers. Bus drivers are frontline workers, and they're facing exposure to coronavirus hundreds, maybe even thousands of times throughout their shift. So we talked about that. Also, Eric recently was on an episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So if you want to watch that, you can go to ABC's website. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
That one of the things that I'll always ask new employees is what made them want to drive a bus, because, when you look at the example I use is if you look at like movies and stuff like that, like they have elementary school career days where, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a police officer, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a lawyer. No one ever says, I want to drive a bus.
And no one ever encourages you to either. You could say, I want to be a truck driver, and people will be like, oh, that's great, that's an admirable job. And then you say, oh, I'll be a bus driver. Why you want to be a bus driver? Like, there's so much vitriol in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember there was a guy who cut me off and then ended up pulling alongside of me to cuss me out. And I said, well, bruh, you cut me off. To which his response was, that's why your bitch ass driving the bus. And I'm like, are people under the impression that we don't get paid to do this?
I don't think they are. I think because people have said oh, this is why you make minimum wage. I'm like, I do not make minimum wage.
I make a noticeable difference above minimum wage.
Yeah, we're not balling, but I mean, it's a living, So before that, were there any bus drivers that you ever saw that were like, oh, I can do that, I can do this job? He or she is good at what they do.
The thing is, it's not really something that I ever envisioned myself doing. Oh yeah, prior to that, it was just something that I would get on a bus and then not pay that person any mind. They were just kind of a background person. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I didn't get on a bus disrespecting anybody. And there were some drivers that, I would probably talk to. Just like I remember when I first started with the first company I worked for, because I had a regular run that went by 3 different sets of high schools, and I was 24 when I first started driving a bus. Mm. So the age gap between me and high school kids wasn't that much, so there would be a lot of things that, we talk about. We talked about movies, video games, and stuff like that. Because, I mean, let's be honest, at age 24, you're pretty much just a man-child or woman-child.
Yeah, you're a working high school student.
Pretty much. That kind of tied into how I viewed people before I started driving a bus, and then right when I first started, because I was a lot younger, there were probably maybe things that didn't bother me then that probably do now, just because I'm a lot older. I'm a father now. So, just not just with work, I look at life differently now. So, 10 years will do that to you.
So what's the most rewarding part of your job?
The paycheck. That's it.
That's it?
Pretty much.
You don't have, there's no camaraderie with the community. And
so here's the thing about that. Where we work, one of the reasons why I started going into the field and education I did, which is journalism and public information, is right in front of where we park. This was around Christmas, I want to say, of 2018 going into 19. So it was like the holiday season of 2018. The fire department loaded up a Santa Claus right where we park our car, right along the street. And they were getting ready to do, I'm guessing, a photo op or maybe a Toys for Tots or something like that. I know that police departments do a lot of PR stuff.
Yeah.
Transportation doesn't do that. Yeah. And if you look at what the PR for transit is, in a way,
it's just drive the bus.
It's not even drive the bus. Let's say, for example, if you follow Metro LA on Instagram, mm-hmm. very little of it is about the bus. It's just the person who handles the social media account taking pictures of things that she sees walking to work. Mm-hmm. So you never really get to see what it's like to be a bus driver, or operator if you want to sound fancy.
Yeah, operator.
I don't drive, I operate.
I operate this motor vehicle.
That's why, some places are like, no, you don't drive a bus, you operate a coach.
I don't think what we drive buses. The coaches are like the MCIs, the big commuter.
But again, like I said, it sounds
bus.
fancy. You get to say it with your pinky out. So operator. So so the thing is, because there really isn't any institution that frames bus operators in a certain light, there really isn't that camaraderie. You might get individual on a very small micro scale of the public being appreciative of what you do, but the frame is just you just out there driving a bus.
Do you feel like that's the most challenging part of the job?
In a way, yes. I feel the most challenging part of the job, the public are who they are. The name calling, I've been called every single racial slur that you can call a black man, every single one at least twice. I've been called, about a month ago, I got called a fat faggot nigger.
Wow.
And
they went all out.
And that's
a triple whammy.
Yeah. Man. So the only part about that, because I've been so desensitized and become callous to this job and insults, the only part about that was offensive was I looked at my gut and said, you know what, I probably could stand to lose some weight.
That was like a wake up call.
Because it was always just it was like always
the other two that didn't stick, but.
But like I said, I'm like, the thing is, I'm like, I wasn't always, hey, fat ass.
But it's also like, we don't get the luxury of staying at home and just eating a bunch of food during this quarantine pandemic. And that's like, we still have to come to work.
Yeah, and the thing that really tears me up about that, and that kind of ties into the most challenging part of the job, is what happens internally. The public are who they are. You're always going to have to deal with the undesirables because, let's be honest, Los Angeles, regardless of how much money they keep dumping into transportation, it's always going to be car-eccentric.
Yeah.
It's always going to be centralized around the personal vehicle because the way that the city developed, everybody working in Santa Monica, for example, lives in the Inland Empire. Everybody working downtown lives in Long Beach.
Because no one can really afford to kind of live where they work anymore.
I mean, unless you are like one of the tech bros, I guess.
But other than that, it makes up even if you could be a supervisor, general manager of a post office, which is supposed to be is good money, I guess. But can you really afford to do that and live in Santa Monica?
I'm going to assume that the only thing that you can do working in Santa Monica and live in Santa Monica is sell drugs.
That's very lucrative.
Yeah, I'm the only.
The dope game is very. I actually watched a couple of white kids when I was waiting to relieve, and I watched to see like a car pull up, and then they kind of like pull up alongside the car, a little bit of chit chat. I see like a handshake, and then as soon as that car pulls up, another car pulls into that same parking spot. Same. They slinging dope out here, like right out in.
No, it's not just dope. It's heroin. It's coming back and in a big way.
It's very in vogue right now. So where do you see the transit industry going in the future? This is like not just in the city that we live in, but,
Just overall, just like everything else. I'm like, it's going to try and capitalism's going to win. For the unionized gigs, you're going to see that diminish because everybody looks at it as a burden of cost.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
They see it as expendable.
Yeah, because, one of the things that I saw while driving the bus kind of irked me because, you're in a city that's looking to reduce its costs. You have furloughs, you have layovers, and everybody's saying, like, hey, we need everybody's participation. Not everybody's going to make the job cut, and everyone who does, you're going to see massive restrictions and massive modifications to your schedule. Police department not only doesn't have to deal with any layoffs because you can sell fear. You can always sell fear. You can't really sell mobility the same way that you can sell fear. So
because mobility equals freedom.
It does, but people want to feel safe.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, mobility equals freedom, which usually comes with entitlement, as opposed to fear, where people will kind of fall in line and follow rules.
Well, that's true.
So you don't want to push mobility too much because if you can just come and go as you please and you have so many options, at your disposal, then along with that comes a lack of fear. You have to pump the fear into the system.
That's true. And I mean, like that gets reinforced when, every city department throughout every other city has to make cuts, but the police department gets to keep their equestrian budget. I don't know exactly how much it costs to maintain a horse.
It's a lot.
But
it's a lot of money, dude.
To do that while patrolling when you could either do that on clip.
They don't even clean up the shit. They don't even have somebody to come along and like
Well, that's where they made the cuts.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm like...
So they got rid of the horses?
No, we kept the horses, but the person who cleaned up the shit, boom, gone.
And that's the future of transit. So what's the nicest thing a passenger has ever done? Like, when I was coming together with the questions, the first thing I wanted to ask was like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened? But a lot of people don't consider the fact that we have passengers that do a lot of nice stuff too.
Yeah. So
what's the nicest thing that's ever happened?
So when I first started working, when I first started driving for the second company I work for, there was a really old woman who it was her daily routine. It wasn't me specifically, but the route that she rode, whoever the driver was, she would pack a lunch for him. And at first, I was like, I'm not taking this lady's food. I'm like, I'm not taking a stranger's food. But then, like, she kept saying, like, you know what? Every time I see you, you're so nice. You get up to the curb and stuff like that. I would really appreciate if you took this. And one day I took her up on her offer. She packed like a little sandwich, an apple, some graham crackers and stuff like that. She would always do that for not anybody specifically. It was just whoever was driving that day. So I'm like, so once I started, like I kind of got spoiled in the sense that like, hey, am I doing this route today with, I never asked her name, but it was, like, hey, was Miss Agnes out there tonight? Cause I mean, kind of expecting that sandwich. I didn't bring a lunch today. So, you tend to see a lot of older people, which, like you said, the thing is mobility equals freedom. So a lot of older people who may not necessarily be able to drive anymore, at least still, like you'll have a lot of older people, like a lot of elderly people get on the bus just because their kids may not get in touch with them as much as they should. So you kind of end up being, a therapist. You end up being an adult babysitter.
A social worker.
You end up being a social worker. You have to wear a lot of hats that a lot of people don't acknowledge that you wear.
Yeah.
Simply because they just, you can't really shake that stigma of, all you do is drive a bus. In a city like Los Angeles, that means you're doing a lot.
And you get to see people progress. Like you kind of go from seeing a kid that's going, to high school every day, and then he goes to the local community college, and you don't see him for a while, and you're like, hey, what happened to so-and-so? Oh, yeah, he transferred. He's at, he's in MIT now. You're like, oh, wow. You get to see people really progress and grow.
I used to drive a bus. It used to be my nightly routine, drove it 5 days a week. And there was this guy who was kind of like panhandling, trying to get his stuff together. He was fresh out of rehab and stuff like that. And I didn't see him for a while. I saw him like on a nightly basis, and then I didn't see him in a while. I didn't really think anything about it at first, but I was like, man, I really hope that this guy didn't fall off. So I'm driving the bus down the street, and I'm like, all of a sudden I hear like this car honking at me. And I'm thinking like, is this dude trying to pass me or something like that? Because he keeps pulling alongside me, but he's not trying to pass me. What the hell's going on? So he ends up pulling alongside me. The car, it's this fucked up minivan. It's like a Dodge Caravan, like a 96 Dodge Caravan. The slide door doesn't match the rest of the body. I think one of the headlights still worked, but it was hanging off. And it was terrible. It was the most fucked up Dodge Caravan that I had ever saw. But he pulled alongside me, and it was a guy who was getting stuff back together. And he said like, hey man, I finally got up off that bus, man. I got me a little hoopty, man. And I'm like, at that moment, I was like, the fact that like what you just said, I'm like, I saw this person that was fresh out of rehab, got a job, and then I'm like, he had a fucked up car, but it was his car. He set a goal, and then I'm like, it was nice to see. That's one of the reasons I want to see somebody get off the bus is I'm like, he set a goal and got his shit together and started attaining that goal.
It's always nice to see that. I mean, sometimes though we do see it in the reverse. Yeah. You see people kind of, oh, I just lost my job, but it's okay. I'm a couch surfer. My friend plays. Well, my friend put me out, and you're like, oh, here we go. Oh shit.
Yeah, then that's when you get hit. Then that's when you get hit with getting at the end of the route, and you're like, hey, you gotta go, bro.
Come on,
go.
You gotta wake up.
It's my last trip.
Oh, I can't ride back. No, man, you gotta.
This is end the line, bro.
End of the line, man. You gotta go. I think now we're seeing kind of a a rise in crazy incidents, but I feel like it's always been crazy, but I feel like it's getting crazier. What are 5 of the craziest incidents that's ever happened to you on your bus?
So,
and I do mean just 5 because there's a lot to pick from.
I'm going to kind of compress everything I'm going to compress a lot of things into one. So there's not a single, and I can't stress this enough. There is not one single body fluid that can come out of the human body that I haven't seen while at work.
You're exaggerating there, right?
Nope. There is not one single fluid that the human body makes that I haven't seen ejected from the body.
Stop. Okay. Stop. Now, I've seen like mysterious puddles, but I have not seen it exit. I'm blessed, and I hope this continues.
Like I said, I've been doing this for 9 years, so trust me. I'm like, I've seen there are people have menstruated on the bus.
What?
That I've seen.
Just like, okay, I don't even.
So there's that. I did have somebody. I'd probably. Yeah, there was a guy right in fact, where so I did have a guy jerk off on the bus, and where he did it was in the wheelchair securement area, like not the securement area, but it was
not even like in the back where like.
So he was laying on the wheelchair seats, and then he decided to get on the floor. And then I told him I can't drive the bus with you laying on the floor. So just pulls his dick out and just starts going to town.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah,
wow.
That's no one wants to see that. There's that.
Was he at least under the influence? Was he drunk?
Oh no, he was long gone. He was one of those drunks to where even being sober still like all those brain cells were dead. Wow. Long dead. Right when I first started, back when I was a young buck, I drove through downtown LA, and Skate Row was one of the areas I drove through. So I remember there being this woman who probably, if she wasn't on drugs, would be, like a fairly attractive woman, but you could tell the streets got her. Gets on the bus, she's wearing like a halter top. So she takes one of her titties out.
As you do.
Plops it on the fare box and said, "Here, sugar, this is my fare." And I'm
wow.
like, that is not worth $1.50.
I at least need another $2.50.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't worth, like it was.
Why just one though? I feel it's a package deal.
Well, maybe the going rate for her was $3. So she figured.
So half off, give you $1.50.
I did have a guy die on the bus.
I've had that happen too.
Yeah. Dude had a heart attack, and I tried, keeping him afloat, and I talked with him and stuff like that. I'm trying to keep him up, and didn't work.
So what happened? Did he?
He just fell out the seat, clutching his chest. I called for a paramedic, and then when they got there, he said dude was in full cardiac arrest, and there was nothing they could do to revive him.
Wow.
So there was that. As a line instructor, I had a student kind of put me through the windshield.
What do you mean?
So as I'm training him, I'm standing in the area that to kind of give advice, take the wheel if need be. There was a guy who. He didn't jump into the street. He leaped from the sidewalk in front of the bus.
Like trying to get ran over? Trying
to get ran over. So the student panics, slams on the bus, and I go flying into the windshield. To which I found out that those things are designed to get kicked out pretty easily.
Yeah, they're designed to give weight. Did you fall out of the windshield?
I didn't fall out of the window.
Ooh.
Thankfully. But, when all the supervisors came out and said, "Oh, man, are you okay?" And I was like, dude, Eric 1, windshield 0. There's that, and I did get assaulted by like a 90-pound crackhead once, which is funny because he started, punching me in my arm and chest. And by the time that I realized what was going on, it was already kind of over. And that was kind of one of the things that that made me realize that, when you hear, when you're sitting in train rooms and break rooms inside the whatever bus facility, when people say "Oh man, if somebody attacks me, this is what's going to happen." And I'm like, the thing is, it happens so quickly that you don't really have the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, unless.
And plus crackheads move quick, man.
They do.
Especially these meth heads out here, they're stealthy.
I mean, you know, if they had the muscle mass, they could probably you know, like probably beat Floyd Mayweather.
But thankfully, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
they could probably even bite you on the shoulder if they had teeth.
Yeah, I mean, is it vampire rules? I'm like, if a crackhead bites you, do you become one?
I think so.
Ugh.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it works.
Yeah, because I mean,
one time I used to be normal, but then a crackhead bit me.
Because I don't think that anybody within their right mind knows the ramifications of doing crack, and then still says, "No, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it."
I know someone who did that.
Oh, well then.
I do. I know someone who, a friend of a friend, who was bored on a date. And they were like, "Hey, want to smoke some crack?" And they were like, "Okay." And then they did it, and
just like that John Mulaney bit. It's like if I got a plate for crack at a plate of crack for the table, would you have some crack?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't get a plate of crack. You want to be bad? Let's just be bad. Get some crack. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to get some. We're no longer gonna be the forgotten essentials.
No, I want my hazard pay, or at least a pizza party. With
pizza. Good pizza. Okay.
With a no slice maximum.
Were you here when they did a going away party for somebody and they gave them Little Caesars hot and ready's? That was the most disrespectful shit I ever saw in my life.
If you're going to do Little Caesars, I highly recommend this. Deep dish pizza, extra cheese, won't regret it.
I mean, I'll try that, but I don't want that for a pizza party. Like,
oh no, for a pizza party, I'm like, y'all go get me some, you know, like what is it, Blaze or 800 Degrees or something like that.
I've heard that's really good too. There's also Pit Fire.
I've had Pit Fire.
Is it good?
I mean, it's definitely better than Little Caesars.
Well, anything's better than Little Caesars. A graham cracker with ketchup on it is better than Little Caesars. But thank you so much for doing this, and we'll keep it going. But some more operators.
I yield the rest of my time.